What happens when one of Hollywood's most uncompromising directors sits down with a late-night host who thinks he can control the narrative? Well, you're about to witness one of the most explosive television moments ever captured on camera. This is the story of how Quentin Tarantino got kicked off Jimmy Kimmel's show after a fiery clash that left the audience stunned and the host scrambling to maintain his composure. Before we dive into this incredible tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about late-night television drama. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for every single detail of this unbelievable confrontation. The stage was set for what should have been a routine promotional interview. Tarantino had a new project to discuss, and Kimmel's producers had booked him for what they assumed would be the usual Hollywood back and forth. But from the moment the legendary filmmaker walked onto that stage, something felt different. The energy in the studio was palpable, and those who were there that night would later describe an almost electric tension that seemed to crackle through the air. Kimmel opened with his typical smug smile, the one that has become his trademark over years of hosting. He leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority that immediately set the wrong tone. Instead of showing respect for one of cinema's most celebrated auteurs, he decided to go for what he thought would be easy laughs at Tarantino's expense. The host's first mistake was treating this interview like he was talking to some desperate celebrity trying to hawk their latest project. "So, Quentin," Kimmel began with that condescending tone he reserves for guests he thinks he can push around, "I have to ask you about all these controversies that seem to follow you around. Don't you ever get tired of having to defend your work?" The question itself wasn't necessarily out of bounds, but the way he delivered it, with that smirk and that dismissive wave of his hand, made it clear he wasn't asking out of genuine curiosity. He was fishing for a reaction, hoping to create a viral moment that would boost his ratings. Tarantino, who has never been one to back down from defending his artistic vision, immediately recognized what was happening. His eyes narrowed slightly, and those familiar with his work could see the wheels turning behind that intense stare. He wasn't just going to sit there and be made into some kind of spectacle for Kimmel's amusement. The director leaned forward, in his chair, matching the host's energy, but with the intensity that made everyone in the studio suddenly pay attention. "Let me tell you something, Jimmy," Tarantino replied, his voice carrying that distinctive cadence that has become legendary in Hollywood circles. "I don't defend my work because my work doesn't need defending. What I do need to address is this habit you seem to have of asking loaded questions designed to make your guests look foolish, while you sit there acting like some kind of moral authority." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they were expecting to see on their screens. Kimmel's smile faltered for just a moment, but he quickly recovered, doubling down on his approach instead of recognizing the warning signs. He clearly thought he could steamroll over Tarantino the way he does with so many other guests who come on his show just grateful for the exposure. But this was different. This was a master filmmaker who has spent decades fighting for his artistic vision against studios, critics, and anyone else who tried to tell him how to make movies. "Come on, Quentin. You have to admit that some of the criticism is valid," Kimmel pressed, his tone becoming even more patronizing. "I mean, the violence in your films, the language. Some people find it problematic." He was clearly trying to bait Tarantino into some kind of defensive response that he could then mock or dismiss. The host had made the critical error of assuming he could treat one of Hollywood's most respected directors like some reality TV star desperate for attention. The tension in the studio was becoming impossible to ignore. Camera operators were getting nervous. Producers were whispering urgently into their headsets, and the audience was starting to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't going according to anyone's script, and the night was about to take a turn that no one in that studio would ever forget. Tarantino's response came like a verbal sledgehammer, delivered with the precision and intensity that has made him one of the most quotable directors in cinema history. "Problematic?" he repeated, his voice rising with incredulity. "You want to talk about what's problematic. What's problematic is sitting in that chair thinking you have the right to lecture artists about their work, when your biggest contribution to culture is making jokes about celebrities' personal lives and pretending that somehow makes you relevant. The studio fell into complete silence. Even the band members, who usually keep playing soft background music during commercial breaks, had stopped what they were doing to watch this unprecedented confrontation unfold. Kimmel's face went through a series of expressions, from shock to anger to what could only be described as panic. He had clearly never encountered a guest who was willing to push back this hard against his usual routine. But instead of backing down or trying to diffuse the situation with some self-deprecating humor, Kimmel made his second major mistake of the evening. He decided to get defensive and try to assert his authority as the host. "Hey, wait a minute," he said, his voice taking on an edge that his regular viewers rarely hear. "This is my show, and I think I have the right to ask whatever questions I want to ask. If you don't want to answer them, maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on." Tarantino laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes right before someone delivers a devastating verbal blow. "Your show?" he said, leaning back in his chair with an expression of pure disdain. "This isn't your show, Jimmy. This is a corporate product designed to sell advertising space between celebrity gossip and manufactured controversy. You're not a journalist, you're not an interviewer, you're a host in the same way that a virus needs a host. You feed off other people's talent and creativity because you don't have any of your own." The audience was now completely captivated by what they were witnessing. Some were laughing nervously. Others were gasping at the brutal honesty of Tarantino's words. But all of them realized they were seeing something that would never make it to air in its unedited form. This was raw, unfiltered conflict between two very different approaches to entertainment, and it was becoming clear that only one of them was going to walk away from this encounter with their dignity intact. Kimmel's response revealed just how unprepared he was for this level of intellectual combat. Instead of trying to engage with the substance of what Tarantino was saying, he fell back on the weakest possible defense. "You know what, Quentin? I think you're being incredibly rude, to me and to my audience. We invited you here to promote your work, not to insult everyone involved in making this show happen." His voice was getting higher and more strained with each word, and it was becoming obvious to everyone in the studio that he was losing control of the situation. "Rude!" Tarantino shot back, his eyes blazing with the kind of passion that has fueled his entire career. "You want to know what's rude? Rude is inviting someone onto your show and then trying to ambush them with gotcha questions designed to make them look bad. Rude is pretending to be interested in someone's work when all you really want is to create some cheap controversy for your highlight reel. Rude is thinking that your audience is so stupid that they can't tell the difference between genuine conversation and manufactured drama." The director was just getting started, and everyone in the studio could sense that this confrontation was about to reach a boiling point. Kimmel's producers were frantically trying to figure out how to handle a situation that was spiraling completely out of their control, while the host himself was beginning to realize that he had picked a fight with someone who was operating on a completely different level. "I've been making movies for over 30 years, Tarantino continued, his voice gaining momentum like a freight train picking up speed. "I've worked with the greatest actors, the most talented crews, and the most passionate storytellers in the business. And you think you can sit there in your little late-night kingdom and pass judgment on work that will still be discussed and analyzed long after your show is nothing but a footnote in television history." Kimmel's face had gone from pale to red to something approaching purple, as the full weight of Tarantino's verbal assault hit home. The host's hands were actually shaking as he reached for his water glass, a physical manifestation of just how thoroughly he was being dismantled in front of his own audience. But rather than admit defeat, or try to salvage the situation with some grace, he made the fatal decision to escalate things even further. "You know what, Quentin?" Kimmel said, his voice cracking with barely controlled rage. I think you've said enough. This is supposed to be entertainment television, not some platform for you to come on here and attack me personally just because I asked you some legitimate questions about your controversial career choices. The irony of calling his ambush questions legitimate, while simultaneously complaining about personal attacks, was lost on him entirely. Tarantino stood up from his chair, a move that sent a ripple of electricity through the entire studio. "Controversial career choices?" he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of decades of fighting for artistic integrity. "My career choices have resulted in some of the most critically acclaimed and culturally significant films of the past 3 decades. Your career choices have resulted in you sitting behind that desk every night, desperately trying to stay relevant, by feeding off the accomplishments of your betters." The audience was now openly gasping and murmuring, completely absorbed in this unprecedented display of television drama. Some were pulling out their phones to record what was happening, sensing that they were witnessing something that would become legendary in entertainment history. The tension in the room had reached a level that was almost suffocating, and everyone present knew that something dramatic was about to happen. Kimmel, realizing that he was completely outmatched in this verbal sparring match, made his final and most desperate move. He turned to his producers and security team with a look of panic in his eyes. "I think we need to take a commercial break," he announced, but Tarantino wasn't finished with him yet. "Oh, we're taking a break now?" the director said with a laugh. That was equal parts amused and contemptuous. "Is that how you handle it when someone doesn't play along with your little game? You just cut to commercial and pretend like nothing happened?" That's exactly the kind of intellectual cowardice I'd expect from someone who built their career on making fun of people who can't fight back. At this point, Kimmel made the decision that would define this entire encounter. Rather than try to salvage the situation or show any kind of professional grace under pressure, he signaled to his security team and actually had Tarantino escorted from the studio. The director didn't resist, but he also didn't go quietly. As he was being led away, he turned back to address both Kimmel and the audience one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the stunned studio, "you've just witnessed exactly what's wrong with modern entertainment. When faced with genuine passion, real artistry, and honest criticism, the response isn't to engage or defend or even disagree with dignity. The response is to shut down the conversation and remove the person who dared to speak truth to power." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. "Jimmy Kimmel just proved every point I made about him tonight, and he did it in front of all of you." As the studio doors closed behind the legendary filmmaker, the audience sat in complete silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Kimmel, left alone on his stage, looked like a man who had just realized he'd made a terrible mistake. His attempt to create easy entertainment at Tarantino's expense had backfired spectacularly, revealing him to be exactly the kind of shallow, opportunistic host that the director had accused him of being. The remaining minutes of the show were awkward beyond description, with Kimmel fumbling through his remaining segments while clearly shaken by what had just occurred. He had started the evening thinking he could push around one of Hollywood's most respected directors, and instead he had been thoroughly exposed as a pretender who crumbles the moment he faces any real intellectual challenge. So there you have it, the complete story of how Quentin Tarantino got kicked off Jimmy Kimmel's show after refusing to play along with the host's attempt to create cheap controversy. It's a perfect example of what happens when genuine artistic integrity meets manufactured television drama, and why real talent will always triumph over shallow opportunism. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Drop a comment below and let me know if you think Kimmel got what he deserved. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood.